Bitcoin is going to be used as a payment system when people will not want fiat anymore. Money in China have always been fiat from the start, from antiquity. Their coins was by design made to not worth almost anything, just to have more corn circulate in the economy. That's really a fiat way to think. So a good that is easy to exchange and naturally emerge and is used by a lot of people to exchange, and that would be the root of money. Allow people to specialize in some craftsmanship. Before that, everybody was like a peasants, to make his own food to survive. The only reason fiat is worth something, it's because we think that in the future we're going to be able to exchange that for some goods and services. That's it. On the other side, the credit theory of money does fit with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is like some virtual money, it's not physical. It's just, you think that in the future someone will exchange their value comes exactly from the same concept. It's called monetary premium.
I give some overview of who you are and especially why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Yeah, I'm David Saint-Ange. I'm French Canadian, so that's why I have this weird accent in English. I'm from I live near Montreal, and I discovered, I found Bitcoin in 2018, and I've read quite a few books, maybe 30 or 40 books about Bitcoin in 2 years, and then I decided to write my own book, which is Bitcoin, Everything You Need to Know. I wrote it in French first to attack the French market, and then we have it translated. And I wrote this book because I was thinking that my mother would not read 10 books about Bitcoin to understand it. So I made some kind of a summary of all the books I've read to make something more concise for the layman to understand Bitcoin. And during those research, I found I went really deep into hyperinflation. I studied a lot of hyperinflation. We did a podcast together about hyperinflation, all those bills with a lot of zeros, or all those worthless currency that I give out to people at conference. I went to Miami and gave out 2,000 of those bills at the Bitcoin conference in 2023. So maybe some of you might have seen me in a conference in France, in Canada, or in the United States, giving out those bills for free as bookmarks for books, because they're completely worthless. So that's my profile. I study inflation, hyperinflation, and now I'm more deep into history of money, because I wanted to understand how money emerged, and that's a deep rabbit hole. And I think that's what's going to be the subject of the podcast today.
Absolutely, I would love that. And it's also it's highly really commended our first episode, and people also really loved it, where we talked about hyperinflation, and you have literally books with all the coins, and you can actually see them. So, and I think we showed them actually in a podcast. So I think this is actually something really cool to check out. But today it's something super interesting in how money, what's the origin of money and how money actually emerges, especially then also looking at how does this affect Bitcoin and how does Bitcoin emerge and all those things. But maybe let's start with the two theories that you kind of have with those commodity and with the views that you have there. How does money emerge?
Yeah, there's two leading theories. There's the commodity money theory that are backed by those more classic economists or Austrian economists that says that money simply emerge out of barter. And so people back in the days, maybe in Mesopotamia or earlier than that, maybe in Neolithic, had some goods that were largely that had a lot of demand for, and those economists thought that maybe the most exchangeable or the more sellable good that, well, the current way to say that is the more sellable good. But back in the days, there were no like commerce, so the good that had the most demand for exchange would be chosen by those tribes to as some kind of proto money, so that's how they see that. So a good that is easy to exchange, that naturally emerge and is used by a lot of people to exchange, and that would be the root of money. The other theory is the credit theory of money, would basically say that there was no barter that was used. Yeah. Oh, those those that's the Mac thing. Sorry about that. Woo. Fireworks. Yeah. So those tribes would not. Well, there's no proof. They said that there's no empirical proof that barter was used really a lot for the exchange. They say that it was only used between different tribes, not inside tribes. They say that inside tribes, they would just use credit, informal credit. So their theory pretend that credit precedes money, and that those tribes were not doing barter; they were doing informal credit. So let's say formal credit. What is informal credit? It's just that I'm going to give you a fish, and later maybe you can give me some wheats. Yeah, that's just informal credit, and you can do that in tribes that are like smaller in size. As soon as you get like real civilizations, like Mesopotamian civilization back in let's say third millennium, third millennia, third millennium BC, you would get civilization that are so big that you cannot do informal credit. You need money at that point. So they would say that this kind of credit view of exchange, so you just exchange favors and services and goods inside your small tribe, that would precede money, like merchandise, not merchandise. I'm looking for the word. There's the credit theory of money, and there's the commodity. Sorry, because it's marchandise in French, and it sounds like merchandise, but it's not the same word. It's commodity. Sorry, you can cut that. So the when you have the credit theorists thinking about money, they would say that their theory is the real one, because credit precedes commodity money, because we were using informal credit between humans way before coins. Let's say coins were invented. Coins were invented very recently, like in the 7th century BC, and we were using informal credit millennium before, like let's say in Mesopotamia. But we do had some monetary system in ancient Egypt and ancient Mesopotamia. We'll cover that today. So I want to start by saying that the birth of money is not the birth of coins. Money existed before, and we're going to explain that. There were monetary system in Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt that precede coins by millennium, and we're going to explore that. So it's not that clear that credit. Well, I'm pretty sure that credit, informal credit, precedes like the use of money, but it doesn't invalid the theory of the emergence of money from trades between humans back in those days. So I think that's what we're going to cover today.
That's super interesting. So there's like the credit where I just say like, hey, I'll give you a fish and you give me a rabbit. Weird trade, but like one of those things. Then you have an actual credit where you kind of write down what you owe, and like this is kind of like a book where a ledger that you kind of hold, and then there's just like barter, straight out, like, oh, I give you this, and then those are kind of the three things that you've described, right?
Exactly, and you can add another category just to make that more complicated. Is that you can have delayed barter. So, so you will, in your example, if I give you a fish, you give me a rabbit later. That we can call that delayed barter. But the credit money terrorists will say that it is credit, it's not barter. But those commodity money theorists would say that it is just delayed barter, and that's one way that the money could emerge. Let's say that in our little tribe, fish is a really high exchangeable good. It could be the money of our tribe, and it can emerge from delayed barter. Yeah.
But what is the, like, it seems to be just a different word, like delayed barter or credit. Like it's just like it's the same thing at that point. I mean, also it's interesting, when does delayed barter become credit? Like how many minutes, hours, days have to be kind of forgone to actually make them credit?
That's a good question. Yeah, the thing is that here it's interesting because there's two different proposition for the emergence of money, and both use the same concept to prove their theory. So so basically, the credit theorist will call delayed barter credit, and the commodity theorist, commodity money theorist, will call this delayed barter to prove that money emerged from barter. So there's a lot of confusion here. And by the way, we don't know. We simply don't know which theory is correct. As I said earlier, I think I recognize that the informal credit precedes money, but it doesn't invalidate the fact that money can emerge from exchange in those small tribes. The only reason that informal credit is for sure precedes the use of monetary system is that to have a monetary system, you need specialization in your well, that's, we don't really know which way is it. If you want specialization, so if you want one person in your tribe to concentrate on making boats or making pottery, if you want to evolve like that, you need some kind of money, because if this person can accumulate a good and pay later for his food, he won't have to do his get his own food. That's I'll start here. If someone can liberate some hours to specialize in one thing, like let's say do pottery, well, he'll have to get in food in another way. So he won't always exchange his pottery for food, because at one point people who make food will not want more pottery. So at one point they use money to exchange any goods, exchange money for any good that some people would need. So we call that the double coincidence of needs or want. So what do you need when you need something? The other person that needs something will not always match what you have. So those two people have some people need some rabbit and some people need some fish. If both people have those goods, they're going to do a trade, but it's not always like that. So it's called the double coincidence of wants. So yes, so money is fixing that basically. So you can accumulate money and buy whatever you want with it, and everybody is going to accept it because that's the role of money here, and it end up allowing those artists, those people who specialize in one thing, making pottery at those point in time, like millenniums ago. They were able to specialize in those things, let's say boats or better axes and stuff like that. Yeah, in French it's called artisanat. I'm gonna Google it up and just to translate it, because I don't know the artisanat in English. It's called craftsmanship. Sorry. So yeah, so it allowed people to specialize in some craftsmanship. Before that, everybody was like a peasants, to make his own food to survive, basically. Yeah.
There's one aspect of money that's that you kind of didn't touch on, that it's also not just a means to just exchange things, but it kind of became a ranking system in our society of like, oh, like how much money do you have? Like you keep track of things, which is interesting. And I already had one guest on, I think like maybe a few more, but like one that where we really discussed it, where he said we now have Bitcoin and we might have the chance of being in such an abundant future where we don't need money, and money kind of unemerges. I have no clue how to say that. I have a hard time believing that.
We'll need free energy. We need fusion. We'll basically need fusion to have that.
But do you think a moneyless society without ranking, without money, where we just say like, oh, I want a Ferrari now, and like just you order it on your phone and like it stands there, you don't have to pay for it because we have so many Ferraris, so it doesn't really matter. Like, is that? Do you think that that is even achievable?
There's 2 points here. We start like this. Before specialization, before craftsmanships, people were all equals in those society. We're talking Neolithics, like millions, like thousands of years ago, and they seems like almost all equals, and they had all the same type of house. All the tombs were alike, and it's really when the exchanges, like not commerce but really economic exchanges began. They had some rare things like bitumen, and they had like some stones to craft axes and knives and stuff. And when they began to exchange that, there was a concept of wealth that emerged, and then inequalities began to show up, and we can see that in their houses. Their houses became different. The people who accumulate a lot of wealth at the type of wealth at the time would have different houses than people that would not accumulate those goods. So we can see that it's an evolution, like not inequalities, because it would be weird to say that, but it kind of is. Like commerce brought more wealth to exchanges brought some more wealth to people that were able to produce or accumulate more of these goods, and it shows in their tombs and in their houses, because we don't have any written trace from that time, right? So all we can see is their houses, their settlements, how houses were set up, and their tombs. That's what we have access. And in their tombs, we can see that they maybe were put there in their tombs with those axes and maybe some golds and some jewelries. And we can see that there were some hierarchical difference in different classes, even back in those days, because of the emergence of commerce. And to the second point I want to talk about, if you want to talk in a new way that we're going to have no more use of money, we would need two things: a society like Star Trek, maybe, where food is abundant, energy is abundant and free, and we have some kind of robots or way of making all the thing we need without works. Because if you're talking about a Ferrari, if someone have to make, if any human has to make the Ferraris, you need to pay them, or at least, maybe we can talk about, maybe we can think about communism. You say that, that everybody works, but nobody pay. Well, how do you distribute the resource? That's always a problem. It's always centrally planned. So if you think of a centrally planned future, whereas food is free, energy is free, and robots are, maybe we can get rid of money, but I don't really think it's possible. I think money is useful to distribute the resources more efficiently. So even in a society that have access to free energy and free food, we could still put our time in projects we think are worth something. So if it's centrally planned, you do what the central planner think you should do, that's communism. And if you want to live in a free society that where you decide what you do with your time, you need money. That's the way I would say it. So saying that we would reach a society where we don't need money, I think it's the only logical way to do that is communism. And I don't think you're going to be free because you're not going to be able to decide what you do with your time. So if you want to live in a free society, for me, you need money because when you decide to do something, well, you make a choice. You almost always make an economical choice. So what is the best thing you can do with your money? So I think money is really useful in a free, well, is needed to have a free society. Yeah.
I agree with that, and I love it's hard for me to imagine a moneyless society, especially because I do think there will always be something like materials, experiences, activities, whatever that will be rare and have more demand than supply.
Exactly.
And then you need money to kind of deal with, with that reality.
Who's going to get those resources? Of course. Yeah, for sure. So in the communism, it's all the people at the top that receive all the rare things, and the peasants there receive all the rest. That's basically it. So people have a hard time to understand that capitalism and money is just a way to distribute resources in the fair way, I guess, because it's not limited to like those central planner that are gonna use the system for their own sake.
Yeah, and now back to the money emerging question, because it's super interesting. There we had times where gold emerges money. We had times where stones and seashells and all those things emerged as money. I mean, there's like in jail, there's cigarettes, like there's all types and forms of money. But then we also had that fiat thing that kind of emerges. And now there's like those opposing views that say like, oh, like gold, that's how money emerges. And no, like there's like also credit and there's fiat, and it's fine to have that view of that. How, and you said already there's like no right, like there's no like that one theory, just because in history we have seen both. Like we now live in a fiat world, and we previously lived in a gold standard. And maybe in this fiat world now Bitcoin is emerging. How do you make that someone, like, it's so hard to explain. And also when you, I don't know if I have a specific question, actually, I'm just rambling, but I have a lot of interesting thoughts on that, because if you ask people on the street right now, like just like 500 random people, and ask them what is money, there will come a lot of different answers. They will say like, oh, like, because when you ask that, for example, in Austria, they will say like, oh yeah, euro, that's money. There might be someone in there that says like, oh yeah, like gold, that's money, right? There might be a lunatic like me saying like, oh yeah, Bitcoin, that's money. Or someone saying like, oh, you have to have that, the properties of money. And then they explain like, oh, store of value, medium of exchange, and all those things. So it's such a defining question that there are so many different views in there, which is kind of then saying, if there's so many different views and so many different angles and perspectives, there's nothing you can really relate to anymore, and it's just random.
You're right, and I'm gonna add to this whole confusion, because we're gonna talk about three things. We're gonna talk about China money, the emergence of money in China. It's super interesting, and it's never discussed anywhere. I've never seen this subject anywhere, and so I guess it would be new to any listeners that are very interested in history of money. I've read that in one book. And it's really, really interesting. I'm going to cover that. The second subject I want to cover, it's how the commodity theory of money, a lot of Austrian economists or classical economists thinks that Bitcoin cannot be money because it did not have a utility before. One of the less interesting point of view of the commodity theory of money is that to emerge, money has to be a good that has a utility before. So it has to be used before, and then it can become money. And a lot of Austrian economists can think that Bitcoin doesn't have that prior utility. And I differ. I don't agree with that. Bitcoin can be used for a lot of things before becoming money. It couldn't be just a token that like geeks exchange between themselves, or be used to like a digital token before being money. So it is actually how it started. Some crypt like some geeks in 2009 were exchanging that for fun. So that's utility to me. So it doesn't break that. So there's so those two theories the commodity theory of money would tend to say that Bitcoin is not a commodity to start with, and I don't agree with that. So it cannot emerge as money. And on the other side, the credit theory of money does fit with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is like some virtual money. It's not physical. It's just, you think that in the future someone will exchange some value if you give them some Bitcoin. So it's a bit like it's not credit, but it's it's like fiat. The only reason fiat is worth something, it's because we think that in the future we're going to be able to exchange that for some goods and services. That's it. So I think it's the exact same thing with Bitcoin. It's not like, with gold, the people will say, well, gold is physical, it has other use. And my critic, my answer to that is like, yeah, but it's used in industries, but only like 10% of its stock is used in industry. So maybe 10% of its value. So if we would stop to use gold as money, it would not be worth $3,000 per ounces. It would be worth maybe $300 per ounces. So it's not where its value comes from. Its value comes from is monetary premium. That's a one point I wanted to cover, and that's one way to unify. By the way, those two theory that we might talk about later. So it's just because of the monetary premium that people use it as money, as a reserve of value, and that's how gold get is its monetary value. It's people are thesaurizing it, accumulating it to exchange it later for equivalent value or more value, as it protects them by inflation. From inflation, sorry. And I had the third point. Sorry, so I talked about China. I thought about the weird way Bitcoin applies to commodity theory of money and credit theory of money. And I'm not sure what was my third point. What were you talking about again? At first, you were saying that people in the streets
have different views on money. Like you ask them, they ask about like that the euro is money, then the properties of money. Maybe I don't know if you went there, but it all reminds me, and this is really interesting. Like what the role of trust is in, and I think that's something that's
perfect. That's the monetary premium is based on trust, like fiat. So well, I'm going to come back to my first point. I want to talk about money, the emergence of money in China. What's really, really interesting here, and I've read that in a book. It's an anthropologist. It's called Aux origines de la monnaie. So at the origin of money. It's in French, unfortunately for the English speaking listeners, and it's really eye-opening. It really covers the emergence of money in Mesopotamia, in Egypt, and in China. And there's no real answer. There's no real answer there. We don't know the origin of money, basically, but they really explain how monetary system were working in Mesopotamia and in China. And I'm gonna and Egypt. I'm gonna go really fast, talk about Mesopotamia first to just show you the difference. So in Mesopotamia, you had those tablet. That's a Mesopotamian tablet, maybe from to maybe 5,000 years ago, and what you see there are cuneiform writing right there, and you have those little people there. Those are kind of signature that are made with those signature roll that are some kind of rocks that are engraved, and people were using that to sign. So that's one of the origin money of credit money that are formal. You can write those contracts. They were mortgaged back in Mesopotamia thousands of years ago. They were mortgaged. There was wedding contracts. There were lending contract with interest. They had all this financial system and monetary system based on clay tablet, and we know about it because clay tablets are do not disappear. They'll stay in the sand for millennia, and we can find them today. Opposed to like papyrus in Egypt that would just at some point be destroyed by the time. So we have access to those thousands and thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of tablets like that, and that's one of the emergence of money. And what we can what we can say about it was reserved for the elite, the people who had access to scribes, and it's not everybody that were able to read and write. It was reserved for the elite, and the elite would try to keep their control on that system, because imagine that if you can like create some contracts, the credit contracts, if anybody would be able to create one, write on the tablet, say, this guy owe me 1,000 shekel. Well, it would be a mess, So they were reserved to the elite who were able to, and it was merchants and clergy that would have access to that. And before going to China, I can say that my point of view of the emergence of money here is that on the credit side, they would say that the clergy would impose the shekel. Let's say let's show what a shekel could have looked like. So I have here the very first coin from Persia. So it's like just a lump of money. It's not a round coin, but that's really the first coin in the 6th century BC. It's a Persian coin. It's called a siglo, and that's silver there. So we had some kind of little measure of money. Like, it was not stamped. This one is stamped. That's why it's a first coin. It's stamped. It's the face of a king there that we don't see because it has been restamped a lot during people were restamping those things to make them their money. So you had some kind of lump of money or like round things in Mesopotamia or Egypt, and some measure of metals. Okay, so credit theorists of money would say that it's the clergy that were imposing that as to pay tax. So they were imposing that to the population to receive tax and payment. So they say, you see, even the commodity money was imposed by the clergy. So the authority, because the temple back in those days was the authority. It was the religious center, it was the economic center, it was the city center. So it was the center of everything. So credit theorists credit money theorists would say that it was imposed by the authority. The commodity money theorists would say that no, it was the merchants, and we have a lot of information about the merchant, a lot of clay tablets, and we do know that the merchant were doing import exports of textile in exchange of precious metal, not to be used, but to be thesaurized, to be kept as reserve value. So we see that they were using silver as money. So that would be my own point of view, that I guess that merchants were identifying silver back in those days. So we were talking about Mesopotamia. So we're talking about 5,000 years ago. They were using already at this time some silver units. So it was not stamped. It was not coins. It was just measure of silver as a reserve of value when they exchanged textile from Azur. So it was the Azurian they were exchanging textile to Anatolia. They had a colony in Anatolia, so it's current Turkey, and they were exchanging those textile for measure of silver. So for me, that's a monetary system, and we see a proof here that merchants were using that money. So we don't know if it was imposed by the clergy or it was chosen by the merchant. The commodity theorists would tell you that it was chosen by the merchant. It's logic, this merchant would walk all the way to Anatolia, and it would have to know what it need to bring to do the exchange, that's how they identified it. They didn't wait that both clergy on both sides would choose silver as money, so in Azure the clergy would have to choose, we're going to use silver as money, and on and Anatolia, we're going to use silver as money. No, I mean, I guess it's the merchants that decide that because they saw that it was the most sellable good. So that was the way I see the emergence of money in Mesopotamia. So now China, that's completely different, because from the start in China, it was fiat. It's super crazy. So I show you this coin right there. It's a coin from not Dark Age or Middle Ages. There's a square hole in the middle, and it's super interesting because money in China have always been fiat from the start, from antiquity, and they were using seashell, cowrie, that we called, and even when they ran out of cowries, like it was like too rare to be used as money in their system, they were creating cowries in bronze to mimic the original cowries, and it was not worth more or less. It was exactly the same thing, and the prince or the authority didn't even have the a monopolistic. They were not the only one who could create those coin. They didn't even have to be stamped. They just a round coin of bronze or copper with a hole in it would be money and would be accepted by everyone by law, and it was not linked at all with the worth of the metal it was used. And we have one proof of that is when the copper price went up for some reason, they would just they would just cut the outside to make two coins out of one, because it was not economically feasible to keep. By the way, those are mold. They were not stamped. They are mold. They were they would put heat and mold the metal and cast. They were cast. They were coin. Those coins were cast. So during centuries and millennium, this money was purely fiat, and the worth of each coin would be basically decided by the size of the economy. So if that's about it. It would, when the economy was really producing a lot of goods, well, the coins would be worth a bit less because they were a bit more. I always end up mixing those two those two charts. Well, basically, they would the value of the coin would just fluctuate with the productivity of the economy and I guess the production of those coins. And sometimes they would not have enough metal to supply the whole economy. And one last thing about China, they were not using gold at all, because if they would use gold as coin, they would be automatically thesaurized, like kept for their value, and they were not even using it for external commerce. They were using silk for the external commerce. So they had really a problem with gold. They would never make coins with gold, and that's from antiquity to Middle Age. Very recently, they would never use gold coins because they had fear that it would stop the economy, because people would keep the coins because they are worth something. So their coins was by design made to not worth almost anything, just to have more coin circulate in the economy. That's really a fiat way to think. So the point here, why I'm talking about China, is that that's a point in the way of the credit theorists of money, because we have an example of a great society that based their economy in a fiat coin that was worth nothing. It was just the size of the economy that were deciding its value. And oh, by the way, I found the third thing I wanted to talk about earlier. It was those society without money. Yeah. It's sorry, I'm jumping to I'm changing the subject right there, but I don't want to forget it. It's just that we had two examples of societies. We have the Spartans, and we have the Incas in Mesoamerica that were not using money. The Incas had a lot of gold, but they didn't have money. They didn't have a monetary system, and that's what we can say about it, is that it was a very hierarchical society that could survive, that could function without money. I guess they were really centralized. And the Spartan are an even better example, because the economy of Sparta was working with those elots, I think the name, those slaves, and they like the citizens were like I think like 1% of the population, a very small group of people, so they were able to live without money. Well, basically they had some money, but it was really big ingots of I think it's not silver, but maybe silver or some sort of metals that were using money, but it was really big and didn't want to use it in commerce. It was like just some kind of reserve of value or something like that. But what we can see here is that it was a really small society, like the scribes in Mesopotamia, that were living without money because they had slaves, and they were a group small enough to know what each other owe to each other. It was not a big society like let's say Athens, that Athens to function like a free society, like they were like democracy with a lot of people. They had to have money. So we can see there more the commodity the theory there on the Athens side, and more the credit theory of money on the Spartan side, that were not using coins. Basically, they had some sort of big money that was not really useful in commerce, but they didn't have coins in those days. So all those historical examples, shows that we can see money, the emergence of money, with both views: commodity of money on one side, and credit theory money on the other side. So we don't really know who's right and who's wrong.
The first time I ever made any money, I got myself from that money a watch. And ever since then, I collect timepieces to remember times where I achieved some milestone. That's why I got the Bitcoin 2025 edition when I went to my first ever American Bitcoin conference. So for me, the Bitcoin watches from Coin Vigilante represents the time that we are living in. For every person that wears a Bitcoin watch, I know they are representing sound money to the outside world. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. I know how big of a hurdle it can be to have self-custody, but it's so freaking important to make that first step. We have to make sure it's as easy and simple as possible. And that's exactly what BitBox did. BitBox created the simplest and the easiest hardware wallet to use to get into self-custody. So get yourself a BitBox down from the link in the description. And when you use code Robin, you even get a 5% discount. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need. Yeah, it makes the whole thing even more complicated now.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just more complicated always.
And it's also, it shows that, as you said, a society system can work on a fiat system.
Yes.
I mean, we also see that kind of now. We have a fiat money and we are living, like we are doing things. We are developing smartphones, AI. We are progressing humanity forward. So it's not like we are going backwards. I mean, we as Bitcoin argue sometimes that we go in some particular.
The point is here is that the credit theory of money theorist would argue that, fiat is the right system because it started as fiat. And I disagree with that. It's not really, they use that as like, all these gold is an old system. It's not, it limit us. That's what they try to tell us. And I don't think it's true. So they're using like this, the confusion in the emergence, the way money emerged as a proof that we should use fiat system because it started like that. But I disagree because in Sparta, we can look at history to have those answers. In Sparta, the society did crumble because at one battle, too many citizens died. And their whole society collapsed because they had an elite, a very small number of people. And when they got destabilized by one battle, it did collapse. So nobody had like some wealth stored to restart so they just completely disappeared. So that's a risk. If you concentrate, you centralize the power to just a very few people, you're gonna end up dead at some point. If there's it's not resilient. Okay, compared to Athens that had money and democracy and way more citizens. They got almost, I guess they lost a lot of battle against Sparta and Persians and still exist. Well, the heritage, the Greek heritage, the Athens heritage still live today because I think it was a more resilient society because they were mostly free because the citizens were free and they had money and by the way, Spartans were not free. They were brought to a barrack, like is that a right word? Well, a military house at the age of 6 up to their majority at 18 years old, and they lived with their citizen friends, their military friends for most of their lives, and then they were sent to war. They were not free. They had to be on those military building to concentrate of the value of the Spartans. So that's what you have here. You have the money on one side, like like I would say real money that emerge from let's say a commodity, like more hard money on one side with free societies, and you have on the other side like some kind of credit or informal credit or fiat here with centralized planners in Mesopotamia, in Spartan history, the Incas, like that more hierarchical societies that don't need money because the way they're built, and you don't have free people that much free people there, and it's not as resilient as the just simple use of money and in society like let's say Athens. That's really great example of those two opposing views. So the one other point I want to make sure we talk about before we stop later is the way we can merge those two those two theories.
Yeah, like, and also I think I don't know if that suits in here, but like you also wanted to talk about the Lynn Alden theory. That maybe it fits nicely, like how those two things merge, and how does Lynn Alden explain it?
Exactly where I wanted to go. So there's two way I think to unify those two theories, the commodity theory of money and the credit theory of money. It's really well described by Lynn Alden in her book Broken Money. There's a chapter 4, I think, that is dedicated to that. So what she tells us here is that money is simply a ledger. Okay, like commodity money is a ledger. So the ledger is who owns what. That's the ledger. If you own a coin of gold, so it's a like natural ledger that the possession of the whole, if you own one coin, well, that's kind of a natural ledger, and everybody that see you with the coin know that the coin is to you, is yours. And on the credit theory of money sides, it's like a more a formal ledger, like it could be a scriptural money in bank accounts, or informal credit in a smaller tribe or primitive tribe. So both of those systems are ledger, and she basically just say that on one side, the creation of new units is managed by an authority. So in the credit theory of money, it's the authority or the monetary system manager that decide if we create more or not more units. And on the commodity theory of money side, well, they would say we could say that it's nature that is limiting the creation of new unit. You have to mine gold to have new unit. And let's say on Bitcoin, well, it's the algorithm, it's mathematics that it's the code that decide what how many more units we can create. And in Bitcoin, the possession of coins are decided by the ledger, the digital ledger that says that this key owned by the owner of the private key own that Bitcoin. Is as simple as that. So we can see that those three systems, we can have Bitcoin on one side, we can have gold on the other, on another side of that, and we have fiat there, and those three things can be seen as a ledger, and it's on different what differentiate them is who controls who creates who can create new units. That's the point of view of Lynn. My point of view, I can add to that, is more on the how we value those different type of money. I don't see any difference in how we value fiat and gold. That's a very bold statement. For me, it's the exact same thing. It's because a lot of commodity money theorists would say, well, gold is physical. I can see it. It's great. It shines. We can do like, I could, create a, something to eat soup, a spoon out of it to create to eat my soup. It has utility. But if you analyze it in a monetary perspective for its value, we don't care if it's fiat or if it's gold or if it's Bitcoin. It's the monetary premium. And I touched that a bit earlier. It's just a trust that you will get your value back later. With fiat, what give fiat its value? First, it's the demand to pay taxes. That's the one of the point of the MMT theorists, the modern monetary theorists. That's one point they have right. Well, one way to explain why fiat has value is simply that the government asks you to pay your taxes with this type of money. So people are going to need that money. So there's demand for it. So it does create some value there. And you think when you have a fiat bill, not this one because it's completely worthless, but let's say that's a $10, a Canadian dollar. Well, I know that I'm going to get 10 Canadian dollar value in the near future out of it. So that's some kind of trust. With Bitcoin, it's the exact same thing. You acquire some Bitcoin, and you know that at one point you're going to be able to exchange it for some goods or some services. Exact same thing with gold. Even if it's shiny or if it's physical, if you're saying that gold has value because it has utility, you're wrong. His utility value, as I said earlier, is about 10% of its stock. So if it would only be used in industries like to make computers and printed circuits, it would be worth, let's say, $300 per ounces. That doesn't explain why it has monetary value. The only explanation, the only way it gets its monetary value, it's because people acquires it as a store of value to protect themselves from some inflation or risk of it in the economy. It's a reserve. It's a store of value that people like to buy to protect themselves from some kind of chaos. So we call that monetary premium, and that's a way I can unify those three type of money: Bitcoin, the credit, all those fiat credit theory money, and let's say gold, more like the commodity money theorists. Their value comes exactly from the same concept. It's called monetary premium.
And you also mentioned the nanny state. I think we haven't touched on that when you wrote me. It was I like the word nanny state and how fiat plays into that. How do you look at that?
That's a good point. So basically, what we end up today is that people in the credit theory money would say that we can use money like fiat money to finance the nanny states. And if we use just gold, let's say hard money, we would limit ourselves, like we would limit the economy because we would need more gold. We would end up not having enough gold, and we limit ourselves. That's a bit stupid because what happens is just that the value of the money just go up. That if you operate in a fixed monetary system, you're going to get deflation. And economists don't like deflation because they think about the crash of the 30s. Well, the Great Depression. They talk about that. They think about that, but the Great Depression is not. It's deflation from a credit bubble that burst. You can have like natural deflation, like a growth deflation that we call, and it did happen at the 19th century, at the end of the 19th century in the in the United States, and there was a pause in the middle because they had a civil war, unfortunately. But yeah, so what happened there is the production went up, and they were on a gold standard, so we had deflation, so prices expressed in gold went down. It was great because it was growth deflation, but it could be a problem because people would not want to get paid less. And by the way, that was the reason there was so much child work at that time, that child labor. I don't know it's the correct, but there was a lot of young people on the workforce because people would not want to get their salary go down. But that's just a mentality that if your salary go down but your purchasing power go up, that's perfectly fine. But I guess at that point, we're not wired that way. That's one of the argument of people that say that we need inflation because people want to get paid more every year, but they don't realize they're getting paid more nominally, but not in the purchasing power. So to be back at to get back at the nanny states, the nanny state is an evolution of finance because in the at some point in the 19th century, the 18th century, we invented the insurance concept in actuarial mathematics and all that. It was basically the clergy, and it was British widow basically in Scotland. Scottish widow in Scotland. The clergy there wanted to have an insurance for all the clergy staff that would die earlier than they would, and they had to take care of their wife and child, and they invented those mathematics to know how much a priest would have to pay to get covered to have his wife and son taken care for the rest of their lives. So they invented insurance there, and as those finance technology evolved, in the end they saw that they have a moral aléa morale in French. They have there's a concept in finance that's called sorry, I'm gonna look it up. Sorry. Aléa morale, moral hazard. Sorry, there's this moral hazards concept in finance. Simply put, it's just that if you do an insurance, health insurance, well, people that are in bad health are going to subscribe to it, and people with good health will not subscribe. So you have and the insurer there don't really know who is in good health and who is not. So you're going to have more people with bad health that going to sign up. So one solution to that is to impose the subscription to health insurance to balance the thing. And with all this evolution, we end up with the nanny states that impose a lot of insurance, like work insurance, unemployment insurance, health insurance. All that is evolution of finance and some way to compensate to fix the moral hazard problem. And now we have so much thing that is managed by the government that we have financial problems. We have hard times to finance all that. And a lot of people think that we could just create, those credit theory terrorists, credit theory of money terrorists would say that, we just need to print more money. That's just kind of the point of the MMT, the modern theory of money. We should be able to print enough money to finance all that, and we won't suffer from inflation if this money goes to the right sectors and that they can absorb it. That's their way. That's their view. I disagree with it because I think if the more you create money, the more you create inflation. Inflation is you can only explain inflation, not price rise. Inflation with the increasing the amount of money, because if you just if you keep the monetary mass fixed, if you have a rising price on one side, you're going to have price that's going to have to go down on some the other side, because people will have less money, more money put here, less money to put there. So it's going to balance itself. It's not said that, I'm not saying that if you have a fixed monetary system, price will not go up. No, what I'm saying is that if price go up somewhere, you're going to have less demand in another sector. If your home costs more, you're going to have less money to go to the restaurant. That's really simple math. The only way to have the houses, energy, price of the restaurant, price in the whole economy go up is to add more money. So that's the only way you can have real inflation, because there's a difference between inflation and high rise in price. Inflation is global rise in price, and rise in price is just rise in prices in some part of the economy. So those people would say, we will not get inflation if the money is put at the right place and well managed. What I'm saying is that whatever you do, you're going to end up with inflation because you add more money and people have more money to spend. And that's why in Canada that we still have inflation, even if the price of home and rents went like double or even tripled in the last like 8 years, just because people have access to credits. So they pay for restaurant and their trips and all the other thing with credit. And if we would stop the creation of new money, well, price in some sector would go down for sure because people wouldn't have access to that money. So yeah, so that's how I could make a link between the fiat system and nanny states. Is that we need the fiat system if we want to keep the nanny state in the way it is right now. If we would have a fixed monetary system, we would have to revert to a more like insurance system, like a more normal system where people pay up for the insurance they want, not like impose the whole insurance system to everybody, and where like it's not clear how it costs and it's paid through the taxes from the people. I'm not saying it will not work, but I'm saying that the current way the system work, the only way we can keep it working like that is to print more money, and we need fiat to do that. And I'm basically against that, but I'm just explaining why those people want to print more money is to keep the system alive.
That's super interesting. From all you've learned from money and emergence of money and adoption of money, how would you say will the adoption of Bitcoin go? And especially, is there something we can do to actually increase or accelerate the adoption of Bitcoin that would make it go faster to be actual money used day to day by a big group of people?
That's a good question. I think that Bitcoin it's obviously the best way to protect yourself right now from monetary inflation for sure, because it's really not that hard to buy some. You can even get some exposure to it through like financial tools like ETFs and those companies that buy Bitcoin. I think it's easier. It's really easier than it was before to get some exposure, some protection against fiat monetary expansion. So I think that's the first role of Bitcoin right now, just like a way to save yourself from money printing. And then the second step is Bitcoin to be used as a monetary system. Well, payment, more like to be used like to pay for everyday needs. And I think that there's a difference there between money and payment system. Like Visa is a payment system, a pretty efficient one. I pay everything with my Visa card, not because it's a credit card, because it's not really a good credit product. By the way, it's the interest are way too high. It's a payment system, and it's a very efficient one. It gives you points, and it's super accepted everywhere, and it's super convenient. So I really do the difference in my head between payments and money or store of value. For me, it's all different things, different subject. I guess that Bitcoin is going to be used as a payment system when people will not want fiat anymore. And we could reach that, I guess, in some part of the world. For sure, we are already there. And another parallel I can do is that when superpower lose their world reserve currency, when their currency is losing the world reserve status, people change, gradually change. We had the Spanish dollar, and then we had the golden from Netherlands, and then the British pound, and then the US dollar. Between all those switch, the people who had value, like they had it's like wealth, they changed. They transferred from the Bank of Amsterdam to the Bank of England. So we saw this shift from the people who want to keep their wealth shifted from the failing world reserve currency to the new one. The exact same thing will happen with Bitcoin. At first, people with smart money, with big money, will transfer their wealth from the US dollar to Bitcoin because it's the new, I guess it could be the new world reserve currency. Well, at least to protect wealth. So gonna migrate with that. And at some point, some people will not want to accept Canadian dollar or US dollar. Let's say, do you have Bitcoin? I want to get paid with Bitcoin. Well, at that point, maybe we will be able to pay in Bitcoin with our Visa card or with Lightning Network. Or so I really do separate the payment part from the store of value or wealth protection part, and I really see the scenario where people were gonna want to keep their wealth in Bitcoin and use whatever they can as a payment method. And it might be Bitcoin, it might be Canadian dollar, just because I don't really care if I pay my bread with Canadian dollar or Bitcoin. It's just to acquire a good. What I care about is how I store my value, my wealth for future. And I won't really do that I would do that in Venezuelan Bolivar, because it's not a great store of value. I still do that in Canadian dollar. I have some financial product in Canadian dollar still. And I have I'm not Bitcoin rich, by the way, but I have a small part of my wealth that I store in Bitcoin to protect myself from the failing fiat monetary system. So that's how I see it. There's a very big difference for me from payments to wealth protection, and we can see in the history the switch between those different world reserve currency, that the smart money, the wealthy people would follow the new monetary standard to protect themselves from a failing currency.
It's so interesting. And for the people don't know that, but we talked about before the podcast started, how long are we going? We're aiming for 1 hour. We probably can do it within 1 hour. And I have 50 more questions.
No, but go ahead. You go ahead. You can. We have some time. Go ahead.
I think we covered it nicely, and I think we have a nice basis. I think you really. You're one of, I don't think I know any other person that knows the history and the origin of money that good with all the examples and with all your artifacts that you have and what you can actually show. And I also remember last time we actually talked about how the coin came to be and how it originated very close to Austria. I think somewhere in Germany or something like that.
The dollar, yeah.
The dollar, the thaler in Germany. Yeah. That was also fascinating. So I learned a lot. It was a lot to process. Even there's more and more rarely for me episodes where I'm like, oh shit, that's a lot of information all at once. So thank you so much, David, already for bringing all those things on. We have one question that I ask each and every one of my returning guests on my podcast, and the question is, what have you learned outside of Bitcoin since your last appearance on the podcast?
Outside of Bitcoin, well, I did learn more about the emergence of money since our last podcast, because I did a 8-hour courses. All the knowledge I shared today will be available on and even way more, by the way, will be available on Plan B Network sometime this year. I'm revising I'm correcting the transcript right now to be able to translate it in English, because I made video courses with my friends from How to Bitcoin. It's an 8-hour course on the emergence of money. And Plan B Network translate all their content in 8 languages. So right now I'm just correcting the transcript that we got from the videos, and it's gonna be available in English because they're gonna use a AI to reproduce my voice in English to make some not videos but some audio. Some audio version of the course. So what I learned, I dig deep book in, as you can see, in the Emergence of Money, and it helped me explain or at least understand what the impact of the view, how you view the emergence of money on your political spectrum. So, and I think I was clear in this podcast that the people on the left really want the money to be born from credit, and people more on the right really want the money to be born out of gold. And the reality is that we don't really know. And the reality is it did emerge from both sides. It did emerge from commodity, and it did emerge from credit. So I'm more positioning myself on the middle. I can agree that with both theory, but I cannot agree with all the conclusion they make out of their view to give weights to their political angle. That's where I don't agree with most people that have dig those subjects. So yeah, so basically I've went deep in that rabbit hole, and I created some content to explain that to the people, and I'm really happy because it's the first time I do a podcast since I've dig that, and I think it does make sense to explain those view in this format, just to explain to people why it's important to know, at least understand how money emerge, because it would give you ammunition to contradict those people who think that we have to live in a fiat world because money was created ex nihilo, out of nothing in the beginning. And I don't think it's not 100% correct. It's just one way of seeing it basically.
Yeah, and we didn't make an 8-hour podcast on that.
No,
we could have done it.
We could.
But yeah, really cool. We have, as you know, an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you the question: if you had to move out of your country, where would you move?
Oh, that's a great question. I would not go to France for sure. I would not go to the United States either. I might go to maybe Costa Rica. I know some people like Francis Pouliot went there. Maybe Mexico too. I think a lot of my Bitcoiner friends went there. Somewhere in Central or South. Maybe not South. Well, no, Central America. Well, North America. Mexico is North America, and maybe more Central America, like Costa Rica, something like that. Yeah, that's where I would go for sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David, for your time. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.